So welcome everybody back to Veil of Sound. It's interview Sunday once again with a very, very interesting guest here on our little show, Kathrine Shephard, aka Sylvaine. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
So where are we catching you right now? Are you still in Norway or are you in France? Where are you at the moment?
I'm currently in Norway, where I have been stationed since the pandemic hit, more or less, because, traveling back and forth was a bit of an issue. So yeah, I'm in Norway at the moment.
Okay. So, but generally you have more or less fully migrated to France, is that right?
No, that's incorrect, actually. I've been splitting my time between Norway and France for the past, now it's, 8 years or so. So I never actually left Norway. I've always been living here partially, but there was kind of like a few years where I was more in Norway, a few years where I was more in France, and these last years has been more in Norway, basically. So.
But nevertheless, you are neither. You're neither French nor are you Norwegian. If I looked it up correctly, you're half American, right?
I am Norwegian. I am actually Norwegian, and I am half American as well. So half and half, basically. That's why I'm here in Norway.
So you're fluent in at least 3 languages, I guess, right?
Well, I don't want to say that I'm fluent in French, because that's first and foremost not true. I'm way too shy to actually speak a lot of French, but I do understand a lot. So I'm fluent in English and Norwegian, and as the French would say, pas mal in French.
Okay. So, but do you, you've already indirectly answered it, but do you consider yourself really half and half American, half Norwegian, or do you see more of a tendency towards okay, I grew up in Norway, so as like a cultural background, let's put it like that.
Absolutely. I feel more connected to Norway because this is where I've grown up, so I feel like it has shaped me as a person in many different ways. And not having been living in the US for very long after I was born, I think definitely I consider myself Norwegian, even though I do see that compared to other Europeans, I have a much bigger connection with the States because obviously my father is also American. So I get a lot of the cultural references and things that are specific to the country that for me, it's things I know because I'm in this family of people that are half Norwegian, half American, but that I see is not kind of common knowledge. So I definitely have a strong connection with America still, but definitely, without a doubt, consider myself Norwegian more than anything else.
We'll also come back to that in a moment, but let's first of all talk about the music. And of course, I have to ask that. How did you come up and why did you come up with the stage moniker of Sylvain?
So
I chose Sylvain, however we shall pronounce it.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, if you want to pronounce it correctly in France, it's Sylvaine because it's the female version with the E at the end. Sylvain would be with just N nothing. Yeah, just to be complicated. You know French. French is complicated. I chose actually Sylvaine. It's funny because I didn't know at the time that it was a French name. I probably should have known, but I didn't actually know at the time that it was an old-fashioned French female name. But I chose it because I wanted to have something that reflected both the kind of urban side of human life and also nature and something that's a bit more romantic. So basically I wanted to call the band Sylvain to begin with, but I realized that there's other projects under the same name and a lot of projects using the word Sylvain in combination with other things. So I tried to kind of combine this word with other things, and one of the first things that came to mind was to take a name from one of my favorite poets, because I have been a big fan of poetry ever since I was 13, 14. So one of the poets I really appreciate is Verlaine, the French poet Verlaine. So I kind of took the N part from his name and Sylvain and Sylvain and just mashed them up together, and it made Sylvain. So it had the urban side was the poetry, which is still quite romantic and not hardcore city urban, but it's my version of urban, and the nature side, which is Sylvain. So that's why I chose this name, because it had the duality that you can find within the project, both visually, but also especially in the music, the dark and light kind of mixing among each other.
Yeah, that's also something that very quickly comes to mind when listening to your music. It has a very nice, let's call it for lack of a better word, fragility at some point, but it also is very, very strong in other parts and segments. But one thing that connects all of them, or both parts, is your voice, which is really amazing because it has, at least the way I perceive it, a very wide range. And
Thank you.
you have been classically trained, haven't you?
Yes, that's correct. I did attend like several different music schools. I actually took vocal lessons before I started these music schools as well, but I was deadly shy back then, so it was really, really hard for me to do that. So I didn't end up doing a whole lot of lessons before I started in high school in the music track, because you can choose here in Norway where you want to kind of specialize. I mean, I chose music. So I did the 3 years of music high school. I did 1 year of like a boarding school that's meant to be kind of like, instead of doing a gap year between high school and university, you can do this kind of school, which is usually more geared towards creative things. So you can spend a whole year working on a specific creative domain or something that's a bit out of the ordinary. So I chose band. My line was basically band, so I played in a band every single day. I wanted to test out to see how my voice could deal with that, because back then I already knew that I wanted to become like a professional musician. And I just wanted to do research, basically figure out, can my voice stand this? How does it feel to work with that every day? And then I had 3 years of university at the University of Oslo here, studying musicology. And so musicology is more or less music science. So you have history, you have the scientific part, but you also have the kind of production and creation, composition. You have I had singing lessons then as well. And during all of these years, I had different vocal coaches that were training me with kind of classical background. And university was a bit more jazz background, but still, it gave me a wide foundation within the classical method to teach, basically. Which I fought with it in the beginning. I wasn't super happy because I've never really been much of an opera singer or anything like that. But I see now how useful it was, and in terms of technique, it has helped me immensely with all kinds of different expressions. So I'm glad that I had this classical training in my past.
Probably also then in the sense of control and demand of your own voice, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It's I think a lot of people, especially in the kind of more underground scenes, if we're talking like rock and roll, we're talking punk, we're talking metal, sometimes saying that you're trained within a certain instrument is kind of like taboo, or kind of like almost a negative thing, because it almost seems like you have to teach yourself how to do this, or else your expression is not authentic. And I come from a family where that kind of view was kind of the norm, because my dad is very much self-taught. He did lessons too as a drummer, but more or less self-taught, and it's not that he was very strict and like, you can't do classes, it's fake, but it's just like his attitude was more like geared towards not doing things like that, not being trained in a classical manner. But I see now, like as I said, after having gone through it myself, that it really, really gave me the tools to be able to explore and deepen my own expression, and it allows me to use my voice in as you said, a very controlled manner, and a controlled meaning like, I can express whatever I would like. I don't have to worry about, am I able to do this, because I know I have the technical foundation, so I can just focus on the emotional quality. So definitely really, really happy that I had this background. And if anything, I see now, after so many years, that it definitely helped me in my own expression.
It's also interesting because you've already mentioned poetry. When looking at your work, this love for poetry definitely shines through, because it is very obvious, more or less right from the beginning, that you do not just assemble words or throw stuff together, that they're very well constructed and that you gave it a lot of thought. And I guess that also is necessary, than to have a controlled voice, or to be able to control it, because let's imagine somebody who writes beautiful poetry but then doesn't get it out in the right expression. That is something that comes through, and that is also something that makes your project very unique in a way.
Yeah.
And now my question is, when we talked about Sylvaine, I will probably pronounce it wrong all the time.
That's okay, don't worry. That's fine.
How did you come to start this project?
So I've been doing a lot of different things, musically speaking. basically also because of my schooling, I've been, I almost said forced into, that sounds so terrible, but it's true. We were like, we were forced into doing different kind of constellations. We did choir, we did like kind of band, which was like not, rock band, but more like, groups of different things. Vocal groups. I did also regular bands, more like singer-songwriter style stuff. So I've been going through a lot of different constellations, a lot of different types of groups, and a lot of different ways to express, basically, throughout the years since I started kind of getting into music more seriously when I was 14. And at some point, I kept seeing the bands that I was a part of kind of taking turns away from what I would personally like to express. And that absolutely was not a problem. It was just that I felt that I no longer maybe was authentically like trying to convey what the band was trying to convey, because it wasn't, the music that I wrote didn't really work in the band because it wasn't, again, the same kind of vision. And then it just became like, well, I'm not going to push my vision onto others because that's not the point. When you're a group, you have to do something in a community. But that also means that I'm no longer really feeling what we're expressing. So it was 2013. I decided that, okay, I'm going to try to do something on my own. Like, I'd been writing music on my own for many years already by then, but I was so struggling with self-confidence. I always kind of had this really toxic, negative perspective of myself as a musician. So that really held me back for many, many years. And then I don't know why, but I can't remember exactly what triggered me or what like pushed me over the edge. But when I was at university, I kind of had this moment when I was like, I spent my whole life trying to be good at school and trying to like make sure that I had the opportunities in life, like that I could choose where I wanted to be because I had good grades and stuff like that. So I had spent my whole young life kind of really doing this, and then also trying to work with music, but at the same time spending the same amount of time telling myself that I sucked at what I did with music. And at university, I was just like, no more. We're gonna try. Like, there's no reason to. I'm the one holding myself back. There's actually no other reason why this can't work in the long run. Like, so I decided to try to make an album on my own. I didn't tell anyone because I thought I would fail. So that already says something about like how optimistic and how positive of a view I had of myself at the time. But it was in 2013 that I just decided that I need to do something that's just like my personal stuff, because I have all these things, and as I'm getting into my older teenage years and like starting to be more aware of yourself, you also start to have more things that you probably need to release out into the world because you have more impressions that you've digested through the years, and you start to become more self-aware. You start to wonder, you question, is everyone like this? What is this kind of stuff? And so on. So music became like has always been my way to express things that have been difficult to put into words. And in 2013, I was like, I need a project where I can actually be like true to myself. I don't have to compromise because there's other people involved and they feel awkward because they don't really feel the same thing or stuff like that. So I was like, well, the way to do that is to try to start a solo project. So that's when Sylvaine was born. Again, people didn't really know about this at all before I had finished my record, except for the people that were involved in the process of making it, which was basically my dad. And that's pretty much it. So
he played drums on that record, right?
He did absolutely play drums on that record, which was super cool because he's more of, I mean, he's a jack of all trades. He's like so many bands through his career and played everything from like, jazz to rock to pop to disco to pretty much anything funk, soul. But metal wasn't really something he had done before. So it was so cool that he said yes, and he was like, yeah, let's do this, like excited about trying something new. And even though that record isn't super heavy compared to some of the stuff I did later on, I know it was an interesting challenge for him. And for me, it was so important to share that with someone that I admire and someone that has been such a positive force in my life. So being able to be in the studio with my dad for that first record, it was just like, it means everything. It'll be there forever. I can always look back on it and be like, remembering those moments we had together. So. And
that record then was Silent Chamber, Noisy Heart, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then I have to ask about that record, because when I first saw it a few years back, I was like, okay, I get it. Is the cover an homage to Where the Wild Roses Grow with Kylie Minogue and Nick Cave?
No, it totally isn't. It absolutely isn't. But I mean, in a sense, there's probably some kind of connection because the cover wasn't meant to be, but it kind of ended up being like, you could say that there's connection between the cover and Ophelia, you know, the painting of Ophelia, and I'm sure that Where the Wild Roses Grow also has some kind of connection to Ophelia. So, I mean, in a roundabout way, there's definitely some connection there. And I love this song, and I love Nick Cave as an artist. So it would be cool, but unfortunately that wasn't like in my mind when I made the cover.
What is also interesting, you know, on Silent Chamber, Noisy Heart, we see you on the cover. And on the new record, on Nova, we also see you. Was that an intended connection between those two albums, or is it just a coincidence?
Well, I mean, it's not so much about the connection between the two albums that's the important. It's more about what Nova represented for me and the way that I felt immediately would be the correct, emotionally visual representation of the record. And since it's such, every record is personal, but this record has another level of personal to it, which I think, based on the feedback I've gotten from people and the audience and from press, people can really feel that it has another layer of personal in it. It just made sense to me that the cover is just me. There's nothing to hide behind. It's simply because this music is like my soul on a platter, kind of, so to speak. Yeah. For me, it made sense that the visuals were also just me. Nothing to hide behind, nothing to distract or anything. It's just that, because that's what the record is about. It's a rebirth, it's a death. It's just, that was the best visual representation, basically.
Is then also the fact that the first track opens up with just you. That is then also programmatic, right? Like, this is me, this is Kathrine.
Absolutely. It was, I remember very well when I created Nova. It was kind of later on in the process. It was probably the summer of 2020, so the year from hell, basically, for everyone. And I remember sitting back and listening to the demo of that one, which was not perfect because it was the first time I'd done like a pure choir piece like that, and there's no click track, there's no rhythm, so everything is improvised, and it's very, it can be hard to record 5 different layers of voices and be exactly at the same time to do the plosives and then those kind of sounds. Yeah. So I remember like thinking when I heard the track the first time was, oh my god, this is going to be a really important track of this next record. I would love to open the record with it, even though it's quite a risky move to take a 4.5-minute choir piece, which maybe not everyone connects to that kind of expression. But at the same time thinking, oh my god, how am I going to record this? It was really complicated. But for sure, it made sense to open the album with something that also, same thing, where you're using the most personal instrument you have, which is your own human body, your vocal cords. So it just made a whole lot of sense to keep Nova as the opener, because even without saying a single word, because the lyrics are obviously complete nonsense, improvised nonsense, it just has all the emotions that the record holds, and it just is really, it's very strong, it's very pure, and as you said, once again, it's just me.
And then the intention, as you said, like the lyrics make no sense or are improvised, then the idea behind that was musically improvisation and vocalizing, right? Like
yes.
Harmony, building harmonies.
Absolutely, building harmonies, and I love vocal harmonies. I always did. I mean, that's why I use it so much in my music, to layer vocals, because I think it's so interesting how you can create, how you affect the listener by creating dissonance, and then you have like the resolving elements into like beauty, and it's really, really, it's a very interesting tool. And the voice, just like with guitar too, can be used in so many different ways with so many different textures, and it's something that every human can connect to. Because it's, obviously, I mean, music in general, but the human voice, because we all have a voice, we can all use our voice, and it just, I don't know, there's something different from other instruments to me personally. So, absolutely, I think the thing of not using lyrics also is about just like free expression, not being held back by using actual words, not bringing it down, to like kind of a grounded, earthly level too, but like keeping it very floating, ethereal, and all about the sensation and the emotion and the atmosphere.
Yeah, and it's also the way that, just like you said, it's a very, very special instrument, because it's the only instrument that comes from within one's person.
Exactly.
Within one's bodies.
Exactly.
And I also think that it very nicely connects to this idea of here am I, a woman within this metal world. And I think just like the cover has a very feminine strength to it, I also feel the same way about the opening track. So is that also something that you thought about, like your own position as a woman within this realm of heavy music?
I mean, that's these kind of things, like the kind of outside thoughts like that, never really enter into the creation process. It's something that you can take a step back and you kind of maybe notice after the fact, because in the end, Sylvaine is basically my audio diary. So whatever goes into it is something I'm trying to keep this kind of stream of consciousness out of from within, and not try to let too many thoughts like this seep in, like what, you know, or things like, you know, how will people think about this, or what will, you know, those kind of things, but just keep it kind of true to what I'm trying to express. So yeah.
Go ahead.
No, sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to get back to that one thing that you just said. So Sylvain is your audio diary. So
yes.
Are you then also constantly writing new stuff?
I mean, I would say probably in the first years of the project, I was always working on new stuff. As the years have gone by, I think that's normal for any artist in any domain. If it's writing books or, you know, painting pictures, writing poetry, music, you get more and more critical to your work. Or I mean, at least for me, I find that that's the case, because you have a catalog of stuff you've done before, and of course you have a sound usually, because it's like it's you, and you change with years, but maybe the expression doesn't change radically. Sometimes it does. So I think I have like a sound that you can hear through all the albums, but every album is harder to make. It takes more out of me because I really want to give more than my best to the record. I want to try to push my limits always. So that means that I'm always working on stuff. I always have ideas. I have like a million ideas that I haven't used for things, and things that I have my phone is full of recordings of like partial riffs, or me like singing into the microphone because I thought of a riff for like a melody line. But I would say that it's maybe more sparse now that I've been doing this for a little while. And also the other side of the project is taking more time, like the live side of the project is taking more time. I'm not writing as much at the same time because I need mental space to be able to sit down and write. So what ends up happening is that as I said, I have recordings on my phone that work as a stream of consciousness. I have the same with lyrics. I'll write down like one line or a word or maybe like a little paragraph of stuff. So it is a continuous process in the kind of diary sense. But it definitely it's not as much that's happening at the same time as it was in the past, because again, I think for every album it's getting harder and harder to make sure that it's worthy of being released into the world.
Yeah, and also not doing something twice, right?
Sure, of course. Again, like I said, I try not to analyze and overthink too much, but it's just like, you know, it's a part of the job almost when you do stuff like that. So you try to keep it true and authentic and everything, but at the same time, of course, you want to be proud of what you've done. So it takes a bit longer, I think, with time.
What also is very interesting about basically all your covers, all your records, is that they all have some kind of like earthy quality. It always seems to me a little bit as if parts of it are very much rooted in the grounds we walk on, like a strong connection to nature. Let's put it like that. Is that something that you feel, a strong connection to nature?
Absolutely. And as we talked about earlier, I think the fact that I was raised more or less here in Norway, in the place that I was raised as well, because it's really, really close to one of the biggest forests in Oslo. Always being around nature, having it as a part of my life. I spent so much of my childhood outdoors. Like I was always outdoors doing stuff, like making up stuff out of nothing, you know, just really active kid that was spending most of my time outdoors. So I wasn't the one sitting indoors and playing video games, even though I did have that in my life too. But I was spending time in nature all the time. I've always found shelter in nature. It's like one of the few places you can go and like really connect with your true self, you know, and actually drown out a little bit of the noise, the impressions from our very, very noisy modern life. So it's an important place to recharge for me, and it's a place that you can seek for me anyways, you can seek truth almost, because you take away the layers of everything that's distracting you, so to speak, in life, and you can really look at things, look at yourself, and yeah, it's always been very important part of my life.
So you say that you do not, when you're writing stuff, you do not think about any kind of interpretation like we as writers usually do. But I guess that you also know that you are a part of a new wave of women leading the way in different shapes, but still like in the same direction. And let's call it metal for lack of a better word. But do you feel a connection to these other women in a sense? Like Myrkur or Anneke van Giersbergen in The Gathering. So is there something like that where you see yourself as a part of a wave movement?
Well, I mean, when you say it like that, I guess I can see that it is true, but for me, it's still kind of absurd that I'm even a person that other people could potentially look up to, or could like look at and see as like a part of something like that. I'm still getting used to the idea of that, because again, as I said, coming from a background being so kind of damaged when it comes to self-confidence, it's thoughts that doesn't even occur to me quite yet. But it is true that it's really nice to see that women are getting more and more of a space in the more heavy realms of the music business, and it's definitely as you said, a wave that's much more present now. And I think it's something we needed, especially in the metal scene that has been very male dominated, and has had some, let's say some problematic ways to see things in the scene that has been kind of, everyone knew it was hair, but it hasn't been talked about before. That's coming out into the light, which is really good. And I think that the females that are a part of the scene, and definitely a reason for why this is happening now. So it's an absolute honor to be a potential, I don't want to say role model, but potential person that is a part of something like that can show maybe young girls that they also can, it's possible. There's no reason why you can't do the same. Like, don't think that just because you were born with breasts that you can't do this, So yeah, and if I feel connected to the other women, I mean, for sure, some of them, but I don't think it's because of gender, I feel like more connected to other people because of their message and their emotion in their music. Gender doesn't really matter to me that much, to be very honest. Like, I guess that's quite modern, but I don't think gender defines who you are or shouldn't define who you are as a person.
No.
So definitely not something, don't feel connected to someone just because they're female.
It's just the way that I think that, just like you said, it's good that we have more female artists.
For sure.
In this realm, because it's been so male dominated for decades.
That's true.
And of course, in that connection, one doesn't get around the gender.
For sure. That's true.
But only in that one.
That's true.
So back to Nova. So you said that the record has been more or less done already some time ago. How must we envision that songwriting process? Is it still mostly you, or, for example, does your live band now also have more of a say?
They never have a say. That's so terrible. That's so terrible. I mean, that's not, unfortunately, that sounds so terrible. That's not completely untrue. I love my live band. A big shout out to Dorian, Max, and Florian. They're wonderful, and I could not do this without them by any means. And I did actually have, I have to say that now, right? No, but it's so true. Like, again, we wouldn't be anything without the people we share this journey with, right?
Definitely,
so,
definitely.
And Dorian did actually play drums on Nova, which definitely added a whole nother dimension to the record. It would not have been the same album without him, and I am eternally grateful for having him on board with that, because it really brought new life into this project. So he was along for the ride, and we made the drum parts together. Basically, I had some of the songs, I had a more like concrete idea of what I wanted, so I would send him mostly. It's like a very simple programmed drums version of like the main feel I get, like based on, usually I like to have the drums and the guitars or the voice like really kind of married together. So I'll send him something like that, and then he'll send me something back, and like fill in all the fills and stuff like that, like a drummer can actually do. And we would go back and forth like that. Whereas some of the songs on the record, I just went, I don't really know what I feel on this part, so like feel free to bring ideas, and we would go back and forth. And there was some tense moments where we didn't agree, but you know, that's always how it is when you have people from different points of view in music, because we don't exactly have the same music taste, which is actually cool because it means that we get some interesting combinations of things. So yeah, that definitely was different from my compositional process, that I work with Dorian much closer than maybe what I'd done in the past. In the past, I had worked with Neige from Alceste and my dad, and we would go in the rehearsal space and we would rehearse together, and we would like work on the parts together. For my first album, I wrote everything myself. It was like all programmed. My dad added like a couple of things, but it was mostly programmed by me, even the fills and everything like that, which is why it's more basic. But yeah, so otherwise the process is almost always a bit like the same, but it's always a bit different. Like every album is a new beast, but it usually starts with me and my electric guitar unplugged, just like trying to get some kind of feeling out through melodies or a chord progression. Maybe there's a melody, like vocal melody, that comes out first, and I have to try to match that with something on the guitar, and from there I just build. So usually it's the main chords that show up for the guitar first, and some leads, and there will be the main vocals, maybe some vocal layers, and then I'll have ideas for the bass guitar, maybe some of the drums. And to finalize, I have been for Nova, I was working with Dorian to get the drums where I wanted them, where he was happy with them too, and then we went in the studio basically.
And where in that process do the lyrics come in?
So
Before
it's
or after the main parts?
It's very varying, actually. Sometimes I will have complete lyrics that I will try to, because I feel like the lyrics and the song and the melodies and the vibe of the song really fit together, and that they should be positioned together. But it's always a bit awkward when you already have a melody and then you have lyrics and you try to fit the lyrics to the melody, and then it doesn't quite work, and you have to change the amount of syllables and all this kind of stuff, which is not super romantic, but it just has to be done. But that was, for Nova, the lyrics took a long time to write. It was a record that was really difficult to make to begin with. And I wrote so much lyrics in 2018, 19, and 20 that led up to the whole Nova release. But to gather those and to be able to put them into a structure that made sense for the songs, and to actually, some of the stuff was too dark. I didn't want to, it was going down paths that I didn't want to express, in at least verbally express. So I remember that's the only time I think I ever was still writing some of the lyrics in the studio when I was recording the guitars and everything. That never happened to me before, but this time I just couldn't finish everything up in advance. So this time the lyrics actually came, at least for some of the songs, came way after everything else was done. And sometimes it'll come like during the process of making the vocals, or sometimes they're here. I already feel like, you know, I have the title of the song, and I'm like, that title works so well with the emotion of the song, and I will make it work with that. So there's, again, always a bit the same, but it's always a bit different, and there are no rules, basically. It's a free-for-all. So
what is also always the case, that even though, of course, your records, which are, in a way, let's call them post-black metal or blackgaze or whatever, although they are hard and have some really good harsh moments in them, many of your songs have this kind of eerie light tone. I'm pretty sure that it's not intentional, but have you got an explanation for that, or is it just, again, total interpretation?
Well, I mean, I think that's the cool thing about art in general, is that every person will receive the message differently. That's something that's always very kind of terrifying, but also exciting when you take a little piece of your soul and you put it out there, and you just see how they receive it, because people will inevitably receive it in very, very different ways. So once again, it's not necessarily intentions I try to put into the music. It's just, again, the emotions that are dictating how the song turns out. Because for me, music and art in general is nothing but emotion. I don't care about much else. It's whatever the emotion needs, that's what the song will do. Like, we won't put stuff here to just impress or to show off or whatever, anything like that. It's just everything is here to underbuild the emotion that was there at the moment when the first notes of that song was created. So if you pick up like a light, eerie kind of vibe in the music, then that's possible. For another person, they might feel that it's completely dark and very sad. I've heard this many times. So it's really...
Well, you're not, your songs are not the songs to propose to. Let's put it like that.
Well, depends on what kind of proposal you want. But
my wife would have killed me if I had.
Well, that's yeah, like I said, it depends on the proposal, but it for sure isn't the one, like when people ask me to put on my music at parties, like, oh, you're a musician, can you show me the songs? I'm like, yeah, let's do that another time. So, yeah.
Or
no, it's,
do you want the party to end now? Or for
exactly. Or shall we just make everyone like have an existential crisis right now? Let's go. Like,
although we also, apart from all the jokes, although we have to say that I think a lot of your songs will appeal to a lot of people who don't even like the genre. You know, my wife is not into heavy music at all. My daughter, she's somewhere in the middle. A few days back, I played her something from Executioner's Mask from my friend Jay Gambit, and she was like, "He sounds as if he's dying." And yesterday, while I was preparing this interview, I had Nova running in the background, and she came in and she was like, "Oh, Daddy, that sounds cool. Who is that?" And I was like, "Yeah, woman from Norway." Can I have that? And so now my record is I don't know where, you know. Like,
right, exactly. Yeah, it's actually cool. I've heard that a couple of times. Like I've seen even comments on like YouTube videos of various things where people are like, I don't usually listen to this kind of stuff, but I like this, and that's always very cool when people are open-minded enough to give it a go, even if it's maybe not their thing, but and then they find something in it that speaks to them. That's cool.
Definitely. One last question before we come to our infamous quickfire round, because I just had to ask that. You know, you have already, you know, in a way identified yourself as more Norwegian than American, and that you draw a lot of inspiration from the Norwegian countryside and stuff. Do you also draw inspiration from Norwegian folktales or Norwegian stories?
In a way, I wish I could say yes, because it's something that I see a lot of people respond to these days. But me just being me, you know, it's again, Sylvaine is more audio diary, so it's not really a concept band or anything like that. So I, of course, inevitably, when you're using your art as a way to process your own feelings, you're going to have parts of the outside world come in, because it's like, to be able to realize and like look at yourself, sometimes you need the outside influence to be like a mirror and everything. So, and with the world the way it is now, I mean, oh my God, there's so many things that are just so... I don't have words, like what's happening in Ukraine. My heart goes so out to everyone that I know in Ukraine, everyone there. I mean, things are happening in the US, all the stuff that's happening now with the whole abortion law situation, which was just like horrifying. There's so many things that you cannot not be affected by it. So it's going to seep into your art, even if it's something that's more about internal issues and reflections. You're going to have stuff like that coming into it as well. But I have to say that like Norse mythology and like that whole thing has never really been in the pool of inspiration. I always really liked folk music. Like I really think the music from, again, it's not like folklore or anything, but the Norwegian folk music has something very eerie and haunting about it, especially certain pieces, which is why I like to do them on stage sometimes. But folklore, it's really interesting. I think it's super, the Norse mythology is super interesting. I think our whole history with the Vikings is very interesting, but it doesn't really have a space in the Sylvain universe.
So let's come to our quickfire questions. I'll give you two alternatives, you choose, and maybe give a short explanation on why.
Oh goodness.
Let's start off with something easy. Bathory or Venom?
Bathory. Hands down. Love Bathory. So great. Hands down.
Let's talk about like folklore instruments. Flute or the harp?
Ooh, hard choice. I think I'm gonna have to go with harp, because there's something super ethereal, angelic about it. So.
Being the spontaneous guy and looking at your shirt, amorphous or Tiamat?
Amorphous. My guys, amorphous, always.
Alice Cooper or Kiss?
Alice Cooper. Sorry, not a Kiss fan. Sorry, everyone's gonna hate me now. Alice Cooper's pretty cool though.
No. Writing and recording or performing?
Oof. I can't choose. I can't choose. I'm sorry. I can't choose. I have to say both because they're so different and they're both so beautiful processes, but for completely different reasons. Both. Sorry.
Two important female poets, Sylvia Plath or Emily Dickinson?
Oof. Oh God, another really hard one. I'm gonna have to go with Miss Plath. She's really, really cool. So
something easy in between. Jazz or soul? What you rather listen to?
Oh, that's not easy. What do you mean easy? That's not easy either. So I should probably say decisions isn't my like strong thing. I have other qualities, but making decisions is not a good thing. Okay, I'll just say soul because I love singing soul music. Although I do really love jazz too. So
Walls of Jericho versus Arch Enemy.
Oh, I'm not an expert in either. I'll go with Arch Enemy because I've seen them live a few times and they're very cool.
Wine versus beer.
Neither. I don't drink.
Good. We have something in common. And the last one, and I think this could be the most difficult one. Kodama or Le Voyage de la Mer.
Ah, you're gonna make me choose. Okay. Well, you know, I'm gonna be a real selfish bitch here and say Kodama because I was the part of that record and I was like, I saw a bit of the recording process and everything, and I love both albums. I love Alcest in general. Great people, but I'll have to say Kodama because it has a very, very cool rhythmic vibe and Japanese vibe, which is very cool. So,
so thank you very much for doing this.
No problem. My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.